I am recovering from a flu, so I apologize in advance for any coughing or sniffling, but
No, it's okay.
that is what the magic of editing will be for.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Polite Conversations podcast, where every episode is focused on civility, decorum, and good manners. And I'm your lovable, non-controversial host, Ina. If you know me, you know I definitely don't like to ruffle any feathers at all. Welcome to episode 72 with journalist and writer Parker Molloy, writer of the Present Age newsletter. How are you doing, Parker?
Hey, I'm doing okay. I just, as I was telling you a moment ago, I just bumped my head. But other than that, I'm doing fine.
I'm glad to hear you're okay, and I'm sorry you bumped your head. I hope it wasn't like setting up this call or something.
No. It's the other 23 hours and 50 minutes of my day that is chaos. So.
Okay, so how are you doing other than the head bump?
Other than the head bump, I'm hanging in there. You know, everything is relative to the world that we've all kind of gotten used to living in.
Oh my gosh, it gets like every year I tell myself that there's no way it's going to be worse than this. So at least it's only upwards from here, and every year I am so wrong.
Yeah, I think I know better than to think that things are going to be headed in a great direction going into an election year here.
Yeah, for sure.
Because the 2020 election, because I was working at Media Matters at the time,
right?
And as the election came closer, my thought was, because everyone there was working so hard and spending a lot of time because there was just a lot going on leading up to the election, and it was kind of funny because there was this idea that I had that was like, hey, well, you know what? As soon as the election's over, at least we'll have a month or two where it won't be so crazy, where it won't be so over the top, and I'll be able to get some rest in. And then, the election just never ended. And things only got more ridiculous as time went on.
Yeah.
Then we have January 6th, and there was no break. Just went from one disaster into another, which has kind of been an ongoing theme.
Truly, it's indescribable how I don't want to use the cliched Orwellian, but it's truly it's mind-boggling, how awful the world can be.
Yeah, but we all make the best of it that we can. So.
For sure. Well, I am so thrilled to be speaking to you because I've been following you online for years, and it is such an honor to have you on the show.
Well, thanks. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for asking me.
Yeah. So you mentioned working at Media Matters. I wanted to talk to you about your thoughts on what's going on with Elon. And his ridiculous lawsuit against Media Matters, and how that is, just kind of observing that from the outside since you're no longer working there.
Yeah. I was thinking about that quite a bit after the lawsuit and the back and forth and all that stuff. It's kind of surreal to watch this all happen from the outside, because I worked at Media Matters for almost 3 years. So I was there for there are a lot of people who have been there for more than 10 years. So my time there was short compared to theirs, but still, almost 3 years. That's a decent amount of time. And the thing with working there was there would always be people who would threaten to sue. Who would send the writers of things really angry emails being like, I'm gonna sue if you don't take down an article that I don't like. And then you'd look, and the article that they're mad about is just directly quoting them.
And I bet you that they're like all like free speech warriors as well.
Yeah. Like one time I criticized James O'Keefe,
No.
that guy, and he got so mad. He sent this like just angry, he had his lawyer send me an angry email, and I was like, I don't even know what to do with this. And, so I just gave it to the Media Matters people, and I was just like, hey, I don't know who handles this, but here you go.
And what?
And it just, nothing ever came of it. But, that stuff happens. But with Musk's lawsuit, I guess the one thing that, looking at that from the outside, because the whole, for anyone who's not super familiar with it, basically Media Matters was keeping track of the ads that were running on Twitter or X or whatever we're calling it these days.
Right. I'm going to keep calling it Twitter though, but yeah.
And that's kind of just, what they do. They've criticized Facebook in the past. They've criticized Twitter, YouTube, pretty much any social media network that exists has been criticized by Media Matters for one thing or another over the years, especially Facebook,
right?
In years past. But with this, it was, ever since, Elon kind of took the safety brakes off of Twitter. There's just been a lot to criticize because there are people who post horrible things on there. There was in my For You tab, there was a pro-whites only dating app that popped up. And I was like, what on earth? And then I report it because, it's like, let's just see what their things are. I don't think that they'll actually ever take action, but I always want to check. And the funny thing is, if you report a tweet right now, when you get a response, it will have the Twitter logo on it and say it's from Twitter, not X. And like they haven't even bothered to update these things. So you'll get that. But so basically what happened was Media Matters was keeping track of, the ads that were running on Twitter and also the content that was running with it. And so they made an account and they were just kind of refreshing until they saw ads next to terrible tweets, took screenshots and made a post out of it. And that was kind of the argument. And so Musk gets mad and he's saying like, oh, you're hurting the company. It's like, no, man, you're hurting the company.
Right. And by terrible tweets, like you're not joking. I mean, it's like pro-Hitler tweets, not.
Yeah. Like it's one of those things where he wants to have it both ways. He wants people to keep giving him money, but he also wants to be able to turn Twitter into a sewer without anything changing, without anything with the advertiser relationships. It's like, this is why big brands don't advertise on 4chan or True Social. It's because for these exact reasons. It's not that it's like, oh, you're anti-free speech. It's brands don't want to throw themselves into those sorts of controversies. Most CEOs make a point of not appearing super political publicly. Mm-hmm. They put on a very, and of course, every CEO absolutely is political.
Yeah.
Business in general is political, but there's always this like effort to try to appeal to everyone. That's always kind of, that's the best way to do business mostly. But yeah, Musk doesn't seem to get that, and he's like, why don't you want to join my controversy?
Right, and he also seems to not understand that part of free speech is like exercising your right to speak with and next to whoever you want to.
Yeah, and like as we're recording this, he tweeted out some insults aimed at Bob Iger of Disney. Like, why? Do you think that's going to bring them back? No.
Right, like when he did that, what that conference or talk?
Yeah.
Where he said, "Go fuck yourselves" to advertisers. Like, I've never seen anyone this terrible at business.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing, but in all that, the one thing that has frustrated me about it is that the same people who are like, how dare brands not advertise on Twitter anymore? They hate free speech. They're the same people who spent months throwing like wild, angry tantrums about Bud Light sending one can.
Yes, one can.
One can to Dylan Mulvaney to advertise directly to her followers on Instagram. Like, it wasn't a national campaign. It was just one ad aimed at her followers. Conservatives should not have ever even seen this, let alone like blasted it across like the world. And they were like, Bud Light needs to not do this. And the controversy wasn't anything that Dylan had said or positions she had taken. It was just that they thought that, advertising on a trans person's page is wrong and bad.
And they're still going on about it, I believe.
Yeah, they still are. Someone was like, look how much they paid Dylan. I mean, yeah, Dylan got a lot of money for that apparently. But other people, other influencers make the same. It's just that's how that whole industry works. People aren't reading ads for mattress companies and stuff like because they just love Casper mattresses or whatever. They're doing that because it's like the sponsorship agreement,
right? And you know what, these companies aren't like so super genuine in their solidarity or concern for diverse representation either. No. It's just what they think their market wants.
I mean, they threw Dylan Mulvaney under the bus. Bud Light did.
Exactly.
After she put out a video where she was talking about how no one checked in on her after that. Like, it's so ridiculous because,
and Target too.
That was another one. Target's been doing that Target's been having a pride section in its store for more than a decade.
Yeah.
And suddenly this year, people on the right realize that if they throw a big enough fit, if they act dangerous enough, that they can get companies to backpedal and move back to where they were 15 years ago, or 20 years ago. And all that does is encourage them to keep doing that. It tells them this is a tactic that is winning, that is working. So before Pride Month last year, I wrote something that was like, brands need to decide right now whether they want to do Pride stuff or not. Don't whatever decision you make now, it's fine. Like, if you don't want to sponsor a float in a parade, or if you don't want to have a Pride section in your store, that's totally fine. Just do it. And don't do it because of backlash. Just make your choice now and stick with it, whatever it is. And because Target caving to that was far worse than Walmart not having a Pride section and not causing controversy.
Right.
Like I would rather the brands just not do anything in the first place than doing something and then taking it back.
Yeah, it makes them look so spineless and
exactly.
Pathetic. Yeah. Sorry to make you upset.
No, it's exhausting, isn't it?
It truly is. And you know what really infuriates me more than anything is like people like Dave Rubin. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him.
I'm familiar with Dave Rubin. Yes.
Right. So he's completely on board with it. Right. He's like, we're being like, what was the word that he used? Maybe like pummeled or pulverized. I can't remember exactly the word, but he's like, we're being pummeled by the gay agenda nowadays. And
it's like, he's gay.
Yeah, and he gets so much hate from his audience for it when he makes like a birth announcement or something.
Yeah. Well, I remember one time it was on his show. He had Ben Shapiro on there, and they were having a conversation, and he asked Shapiro if he's like, well, like if I invited you to my wedding, you'd come, right? Or something like that. And Shapiro was like, no, I wouldn't, because blah, 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 blah. Like, he's like, because that's against my religion and I think it's bad, and blah, blah. All that classic Ben Shapiro.
Right. And then he even tried to tone it down. He's like, would you then bake me an anniversary cake? No, I wouldn't do that.
To an event that that my husband was at? And he's like, I don't know, this whole thing where it's like, I don't understand how you could, I don't know, like I wouldn't want to be friends with someone who's like that, who's so weird about my own personal life, who would be like, saying like, oh, I can't show up to this because I think that you are horrible and that you're gonna burn for eternity or whatever.
It's so bizarre, yeah.
Yeah, like it's so bizarre, know. But I mean, that the whole conservative media ecosystem is just like that, I guess.
Right, and constantly hypocritical, right? They congratulate themselves about like tolerating these vile views that are not accepting of their basic humanity, yet they won't tolerate like the slightest difference that goes in the wrong way,
Yep. Exactly. They're more than happy to tolerate like people who are less accepting than them, but if someone is more accepting, they'll be like, how could you? You're grooming children, and like all that stuff. But I mean, speaking of Ben Shapiro, I don't know if you want to kind of go into the comment he made about his latest movie.
Oh yes, absolutely. What a terrible joke of a film it is.
Yeah. So Shapiro and the rest of his friends at the Daily Wire made a movie called Lady Ballers, and the movie is basically just, the premise is like, what if a bunch of guys decided they wanted to play women's sports and dominate them, because of course men are better than women, right?
Of course.
And by virtue of being dudes, they go and they win everything, because that's, I guess, how it works. And he was being interviewed by Jeremy Boring, who is like, I guess he's like the head of the Daily Wire. I'm not sure what his deal is. He's like the CEO or something, but he's also the lead in the movie
because they couldn't find any actors.
Yeah. So well, and it didn't help that they were filming the whole thing during the strike too.
Yeah.
But yeah. So he's doing that. They're talking about the movie, and at one point, Ben Shapiro says, like, he says that at first he wanted to make a documentary. Oh, what if we made a documentary where guys just went around joining women's teams and dominating? And then he says the thing that just gives away the game. He says that then they found out that men can't actually just go and say, I'm a woman today and sign up. There are restrictions. Oh. There are safeguards in place. Like, you have to be on hormones for such and such time. You have to, and it varies.
You approached me and you said we should make a fictional film about this topic. Now, to be fair, I think I'd actually suggested to the Crane Boys that they do this as a doc. Yes. I originally went to them and I said, you guys should go try out for a bunch of ladies' leagues. And that became not possible because, as it turns out, most ladies' leagues don't allow in actual men. And they weren't willing to go the full distance in terms of what it would require in order to, the actual hormone treatments and everything to play in some of the ladies' leagues. But in any case, it turned into this.
And that's what's always been so frustrating about any of these. Oh, yeah, well, you say that men don't have an advantage over women? And it's like, no, that's not what anyone's saying. Men, in a lot of ways, will have advantage over women. But things like hormone replacement therapy will affect that, will chip away at it. And also, as I've written in the past, it's like, I think we can all agree that, like, if someone is in their late 20s, is 6'10", and comes out as a trans woman and says, I want to play basketball, being 6'10"
is the advantage,
is going to give that person an advantage. Yeah. So, we could probably agree that this person has a pretty intense advantage in basketball and volleyball and sports where height matters.
Yeah.
But would that same person have an advantage in gymnastics? Maybe. It depends. What about when we're seeing this kind of spread into other areas where it's like, do they have an advantage in chess? That's the one that's
right. And I believe
really,
that, was it Riley Gaines who, I can't remember who it was. But someone was like, yeah, of course, like, men would always have an advantage over women.
it's like, this is it's going outside the realm of just being transphobic, it's just being straight up sexist.
Yeah.
I mean, where it's just like, well, of course men are better at chess because they're smarter, their brains are better, like stuff like that is just so I'd say it's like funny, but it's really sad how destructive like these views are, because there's not some giant issue of trans women going around and dominating women's sports. That's just, every once in a while we hear about every single time a trans woman wins anything.
Even if she comes like 4th or 5th.
Yeah. I mean, well, that was the thing with Riley Gaines.
Yeah.
It was she tied with Leah Thomas for like 5th place or something in a race. And then Riley Gaines turned that into her whole career. Yeah. And she was in the Lady Ballers movie as well.
Oh, was she?
Yeah. She she popped up in there and as a swimmer, which okay. But it's just the funny thing about that movie, though, is the way that they were marketing. They're like, this is something that Hollywood wouldn't make. It's too triggering for everyone. Oh, they're marketing it like that. But it's just like, no, Hollywood has repeatedly made this movie. This concept is not new. It's like, you've got, what's that movie? Joanna Man. You've got that. That was one. You've got the movie Ladybugs. There's another one that was like Johnny Knoxville was in years ago, called like The Ringer, where he like fakes a disability so he could compete in the Special Olympics or something. Like there have been all of these movies that have taken that premise where it's like someone fakes being something else so that they can win in sports.
Right.
And it's just been done, and it's not because of wokeness run amok that people aren't making those movies. It's just that those movies have already been made,
and it's outdated. Like,
yeah, well, and it's a lot of that same stuff that comes up with people will bring up when it comes to like, oh, you could never make Blazing Saddles today. Well, I mean, there are reasons why you couldn't make Blazing Saddles today. One of which being that Blazing Saddles was very specific to its time. Blazing Saddles was a satire of westerns, which were huge for decades at that point. The Western is not a giant genre right now. Yeah. And so if you made Blazing Saddles today, it wouldn't have the effect that it did. And people have made movies mocking popular genres. Remember all the Scary Movie series,
right. Yeah.
Like, and Not Another Teen Movie and Epic Movie. They did that and kept doing it for years, and it made money for a while, and then it just kind of got old because those movies are all kind of the same, as they go. I think that people
they're not even original in their bigotry.
Yeah. Well, and that's always been my issue when it comes to like anti-trans stuff with like Dave Chappelle. I wrote about this the last time he put out a special. My issue is not that he tells jokes about trans people, because he's going to do what he's going to do. My issue is that he doesn't tell original jokes. He does in 2 of his Netflix specials. He's done variations on the same joke. In one of them, he compared being trans to suddenly, what if he acted like he was Chinese and started talking with a stereotypical accent and said, I'm Chinese? And then in another one, he talked about Rachel Dolezal. And these are the same joke. These are, it's the same I identify as joke that he's done several times before, that Ricky Gervais has done, that South Park has done over and over. It's like, it's not that these are offensive necessarily. I mean, they usually are, but but it's that just old jokes. They're not fresh. They're not new. There are, being trans is objectively hilarious. I mean, there's a lot to kind of wrestle with, on that. But
coming from like a more authentic place, I guess,
like
right?
there are a lot of really funny trans comedians out there who tell jokes at their own expense,
right?
And or. I can't remember her name. There's a trans woman who one of her jokes got a lot of conservatives mad, was something like, people think we transition so we can beat up women in MMA or something like that, or and she said, like, if we wanted to beat up women, we wouldn't have transitioned, we'd have become cops or something like that.
I think I remember that.
Yeah, and it's like, taking that joke and kind of twisting it and playing on the tropes, like that is funnier than just sort of rehashing the same, haha, isn't it funny? What if I identified as something ridiculous?
Yeah.
I'm an attack helicopter. Ha ha ha.
Yeah, I mean, Ricky Gervais has been doing that for a decade now?
Yeah. And like the thing is that for how long people have been doing those jokes, for how long people have been telling these jokes, that the public perception of trans people, I think, has pretty wildly shifted in that time.
Right.
Like, I think that 10 years ago, things were getting better for trans people pretty, obviously. But the past few years, it's like the anti-trans people have gotten more or less everything they wanted. They'll still complain about, oh, you can't say anything these days, but their views are considered the mainstream ones. Anti-trans views get put in the New York Times more than pro-trans views.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of weird that they still sort of cling to this, like, oh, I'm saying the forbidden thing. It's like, no, you're saying the mainstream point of view.
Yeah, the status quo, literally.
Yeah, you're just mocking a group that's being kind of bullied and pushed under, and that doesn't get to actually respond to things. As Ben Shapiro pointed out when he was like, oh, and then it turns out we couldn't make a documentary because that's not how this works.
Right. Yeah. What a self-own.
Yeah, the entire premise. It's like that. Yeah, that's the entire moral panic that they've been pushing for years.
Yep. The whole moral panic is based on a lie that they made up themselves.
Yeah. And it's frustrating because there's no room for trans people to speak back on, to actually get their views out.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
It's because this will happen a lot if I'm talking to someone who's maybe not like entirely pro-trans, but they have concerns. Which, if someone has concerns, okay, I try to assume that when people say I have concerns, they don't mean it in a very cynical way. But like then I'll be like, okay, what are these concerns? And then it's always something that's some weird hyped up right-wing thing that's like, well, my concerns are, what if you win all the Olympic medals?
It's such a small percentage of the population, and the fear-mongering is so ridiculous. Yeah. And, as someone of Muslim background, it's obviously not the same thing, and I'm not a practicing Muslim. I'm completely non-religious, but you see like the kind of fear-mongering about Muslims and Muslim immigrants.
Oh, that's a great point, because whose voices get heard, especially I think in the past, ever since October 7th, that's been one thing that, having watched the, people protesting for Israel and for Palestine, or again, like watching all of that, the hate that bubbles up on, aimed at both people who are Jewish and people who are Muslim.
And people who are queer or trans also, like they're also getting pulled into it.
Yeah, there's a lot of this weird, like, oh, these purple haired weirdos are, like
who want us
Juliana
to use
Margulies did that.
Yeah, the people who want us to call them they them, they don't understand if they set foot in a Muslim country, they'd be the first one to have their heads chopped off or something.
Yeah, and it's like, what on earth? Like, what? These are not helpful conversations. They're not productive conversations, and I think that that's what frustrates me so much about discussions of trans people, generally, and really any controversial issue. We can never just talk about something. We can never talk about what's actually the problem at hand. Like right now, if anyone tries to talk about, if they're like, hey, I have concerns about the Israeli government and their bombing campaign in Gaza. Someone will be like, well, do you condemn Hamas?
Yeah.
And also, what do you think about college students chanting from the river to the sea?
Yes.
And it's like, what? What? Like suddenly it just gets turned into this like list of things you have to go through first to express concern. It's like I my personal opinion on what happened on October 7th, the attack. Like, I think that's horrific, and everything I've heard about it and from it, I think is horrific. And I don't think that justifies an endless bombing campaign. That's
Right.
kind of the point here. And people will then, if you try to say that, they'll say, so Israel shouldn't be able to protect itself, to defend itself.
Yeah.
Oh, you're saying you're denying that these atrocities happened? And it's like, no, I'm not at all. I'm saying they happened, but that you can't just point to those as an excuse to then hurt people who had nothing to do with this.
Right. At what point does it not be self-defense,
Yeah, and I think a lot of this comes down to the fact that because I'm 37, so I was 15 when 9/11 happened, and like watching that like shaped so much of my political worldview, because it was that same sort of thing where it's like, yeah, if you try to say, hey, maybe the U.S. shouldn't just bomb random countries in response to this, or if you would speak up in opposition to, there'd be a story that would come up about, civilians being killed by U.S. troops. And if you push back on that, they'd say, oh, so you think that bin Laden was right? And it's like, no, of course not.
And it's the same kind of tactic being used now, right? You're opposing war.
Yeah.
And calling for a ceasefire, but that is being spun as some sort of Hamas support. Not you personally, I mean, just the general you.
Yeah,
but
and that's it's so frustrating, because I think most people, I see people on both sides of this who I think are smart, who are empathetic, who are good people, who dig themselves in, and they don't want to have a conversation. They want to distort what other people like, and it makes sense to feel that way, because there are a lot of people who are saying horrible things, who are denying atrocities, and who are doing all of that. And it's easy to kind of like guard yourself,
to dig your heels in,
to put up some armor to protect against that, because that is horrible and it's hard to deal with. But in the end, it's like, if you're going to paint everyone who takes any view that is not 100% your own as equivalent to the people on the far extreme of that side, then we can't have conversations, because it's going to constantly be like someone saying, hey, yeah, I don't think that civilians should be bombed, and someone then going, I want to talk about college students and their slogans.
Yeah, but even that is like asymmetric, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it really is, but it's
because college students and their slogans, like, I mean, I don't know what your thoughts are on this, but I don't believe that saying from the river to the sea is genocidal.
No.
And while, the same people will excuse, like, the bombing of hospitals, of refugee camps, and politicians saying explicitly very genocidal and eliminationist things,
Yeah,
and
I mean,
yet they want to shift the focus to the college campuses, where people are saying, and sure, there might be like some like overzealous, lefty, campus kids that say problematic things as well.
Oh, of course.
But
there always are.
Yeah. But it's not at the same level as the, people in charge, in power, the politicians and the cabinet ministers calling for the genocide and elimination of an entire people.
Yeah. And it's just like, I don't believe that like most people who are, even the ones digging in on those positions, who are focusing on, student protests. I don't think they're necessarily doing it because they're malicious or they're or they think that the people of Gaza deserve it or anything like that. I think that in a lot of cases they're just very, it's a very stressful, very heated time, and it's easy to kind of lash out, and I know that I've definitely felt that way in the past when like trans rights are attacked, where I just get where someone will say something that is maybe not super anti-trans, but I will be like, we need support right now and you are not providing support and I'm angry about this, like that,
right.
That sort of feeling where it overrides the reality of the situation. Like if someone's like, I genuinely have concerns about trans women in sports, like whether or not there's fairness issues and all of that. But overall, I truly, I think that trans people should be treated as the gender that they are. They should be able to update their ID documents, and then they should be able to just live their lives. Like if someone says that, and the only thing I focus on is the thing about the sports, then I'm really just alienating someone who is more or less on my side, and I've been in that position before where I have. But at the same time, there are a lot of people who use those. Exactly. I just have concerns.
Yes, that's what I was going to say. Yeah.
But and that's why I try to ask people about their opinions on other trans issues.
Right.
I'm like, okay.
Isn't that like how J.K. Rowling started as well?
Yeah. And same with Martina Navratilova. It's a lot of, I got these little concerns, and it goes from being like, well, what if someone fakes being trans and just so they can go in a women's prison or like stuff like that, which I mean, my position on prisons and stuff like that is that all prisoners, men, women, trans, not trans, old, young, like everyone deserves to have healthcare, deserves to be protected from physical violence,
right?
Deserves to be protected from mental torture, like solitary confinement.
Yeah.
I mean, when people the systems that we have in place for with prisons as it is bad enough. Their sentences are to serve a certain amount of time in these conditions, not to be like, well, they deserve more than that. They deserve to be punished more than that, or they don't deserve rights. No, everyone deserves to be safe in prison in any aspect of life,
Right.
But people will get hung up on, oh, so you think a man should be put in a women's cell and attack? It's like, what? No. Like, I don't think anyone should be subject to violence anywhere.
Right.
And most violence that takes place in prisons is, in women's prisons especially, is a lot of like people who work there. There are issues to worry about, but people get super hung up on trans issues instead of actually talking about the actual the big threats that exist,
right? Because
in the
it's
world.
A reflection of their paranoia and bigotry.
It's so much easier to brush off the problems of the world when you can feel justified in standing up for something else, for something that you claim addresses the problem, And I think that that's something that happens a lot with debates about who goes in what prison, and, debates about, who can play what sports.
Right. And when you mentioned the just asking questions routine, you reminded me of, I don't know if you saw this story on Dax Shepard's podcast. He made Jonathan Van Ness cry.
I heard about that, but I don't know the specifics.
Okay, so it was basically just asking questions about, trans women in sports, and just really pushing very hard. And, after you've probably done these types of interviews and you're not expecting it, I think they said that, they were there to promote their own work and weren't expecting this kind of a combative conversation. It was upsetting.
Yeah, and I do think it's important to try to have gentle conversations, and I understand that there's this impulse to be like, how dare you not get this, and it's so difficult. I don't know what the right approach to any of this really is, but I want to believe that that more people than not, think that, most people I don't think spend their days obsessing about trans people. Most people I don't think spend their days obsessing about what college students are saying on campus. These are not things that your average everyday person has on their mind all the time. The issue is that, these are the things that, people who work in newsrooms can't stop obsessing about. The New York Times has been doing campus concern trolling stuff for, I wrote a piece when I was at Media Matters, and I found ones going back to the early 1900s, where it would be like, professor, should he have the right to speak his mind in class? All of these things would come up.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's like these things have been going on forever. They're always treated like some new problem that needs to be addressed, but they've always existed, and we've always just kind of kept talking about it. No one moves on and goes, okay, turns out I was wrong. Yeah,
just even in our short social media life, you see it evolve from SJWs to wokeness / regressive left, and all these different terms.
It's all the same.
Yeah.
Cancel culture,
exactly.
Call out culture, political correctness.
Yeah.
These are all part of the same beast.
Yeah, the same hysteria.
Yeah, and so much of it's just a distraction from actual problems that affect actual people.
Yeah,
I saw something yesterday about how there are people who are part of the government in the UK, I guess, that are now trying to make it where it's like, oh, to update your gender on documents, we will no longer accept documents from the following countries or something like that.
Oh.
And the countries that they'll accept documents from, it's like Iran, all of these really kind of regressive countries, but they, it was the U.S. Only certain states, and it's and not the state that I live in. Oddly.
Really?
Yeah. I want to see if I can find this, because it's really, yeah. Okay, so the Gender Recognition, Approved Countries and Territories and Saving Provision Order 2023. Yeah, and it's the following states of the United States of America: Alabama, Alaska, Arizona, Arkansas, Connecticut, Delaware, Indiana, Iowa, Kansas, Kentucky, Louisiana, Maryland, Massachusetts, Missouri, Nebraska, New Hampshire, North Carolina, North Dakota, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. It's that leaves out California.
Wait, those are the places they're accepting documents from?
Yeah, they'll accept documents from Turkey and
So is it because it's harder to get those documents in those places and those states?
Yes,
that's what it seems like. Yeah,
they're basically what they're doing. Which, let's see. Okay, the Women and Equalities Minister in the UK, I guess, is the one who's updating this. And the argument is basically that in some of these other states, you can update your documents without having surgery first. And
so they're forcing people to have surgery before they can update their. That's ridiculous.
It's so ridiculous, but that's that's been their whole concern for their fake concern, the self-ID. Oh no, if we have self-ID where people can just identify as something, then society will fall. It's like most things we do in the world are done with self-ID. When someone uses a public restroom, you're not like showing your driver's license. We're trusting, like, society works by just trusting that most people know where they're going and what they're doing.
Right. Yeah.
We don't stop. I like there are certainly times where, let's say, like, if someone's in a restaurant and they're choking and someone's like, I'm a doctor, I can help. Someone else probably is not going to go, hold on, let me prove it to me first before you help this choking person. It's like, no, we just kind of, people tell us things, same thing with their backgrounds. If someone says, oh, my name is John, I'm not going to go prove it.
Right. Or even nicknames, right? I heard stories about where children who wanted to be called like Joe instead of Joseph are now having to have their parents receive an email. Yeah, because they don't want children to like self-identify with like different names that are like not on their documents.
Yeah.
It's so ridiculous.
Yeah. But,
yeah, that's the world we live in. Speaking of moral panics, one that I found interesting lately about the left was that all these young leftists were being radicalized by TikTok into becoming Bin Laden supporters.
Yeah, that was a fun little story. It's so frustrating to see stuff like that, because basically there was a video going around that was people who found like Bin Laden's 2002 letter to America, where he explains why he did 9/11, basically. Right. And it was basically boiled down to he hates Israel and doesn't like U.S. foreign policy. And that's kind of the core of a lot of it, and there's obviously the religious war kind of aspect of it too, and
some anti-imperialist.
Yeah, it's very like boilerplate kind of stuff that it's just like you could tell some stuff was not.
And some really like genocidal anti-Semitism, of course.
There's nothing in there that would make a normal, like a regular person like see that and go, oh, well, he had a point. Like, no, he did not have a point. But I think a lot of what people were saying on like TikTok is, they're seeing this and they're going, wait, I was taught in school that we were attacked because they hate our freedoms, that these sorts of like descriptions of 9/11 that don't deal with the reality of why things happen.
Right.
Oh, we were just attacked out of nowhere.
Yeah.
No, like that we were attacked. Like there was a stated reason for why the 9/11 attacks happened. I don't think they're legitimate reasons.
Right.
There's no legitimate reason to fly planes into a tower and kill thousands of innocent people. It's important to know what those reasons are, though, I think, and that's sort of the thing that came up with this TikTok thing. But instead, it was people seeing people talking about, oh, the Bin Laden letter on TikTok and going, oh, no, everyone on TikTok loves Osama bin Laden now. It's anytime you could, I could pull, if I wanted to find people taking literally any position on the planet, I could find that on any social media network.
Yeah, probably.
And put together a compilation that makes it seem like that is a thing, that is a trend. Internet trend stories annoy me so much because so many of them are that, where it's like, oh, are kids eating Tide Pods? Well, I found 20 people posting jokes about Tide Pods, so it must be true.
Right, right.
Like, and there are still people who legitimately believe that there were people eating Tide Pods, when it's like, no, people do get sick from Tide Pods, but they tend to be older people, and they're not doing it on purpose. It's just an accident. And
but how does that happen by accident?
I don't even know, but I remember seeing that it was like, oh, more elderly people have gotten sick with this than, like teenagers.
Oh, really?
Because
I didn't even look too much into that Tide Pod story ever. I just ignored it. So yeah, do tell me, because I know nothing about it.
Okay, I just pulled it up. Laundry pod deaths more common in elderly dementia patients than children. That's it.
Oh, so, how sad.
Yeah, that's that's horrible. But, you will still see people saying, oh, well, your generation is the one that ate Tide Pods.
Right.
They'll say this to people who are Gen X, who are millennials, who are Gen Z. It's just become a quote unquote young person thing, even though millennials and Gen X are not exactly young.
Right.
There are still people who seem to think that millennials are like in high school.
It's like Bill Maher, who he hates everyone that's not on board with him. So
yeah, where he just sort of assumes that anyone younger than him is like, kids these days. Like someone would be like, I'm 50.
Yeah.
I'm 50. I'm not a kid.
But yeah, so I thought that was really a convenient way to tie in the demonization of the left with the Islamic radicalization thing that a lot of these people like to do. Like, I think it was a couple of years ago that Ayaan Hirsi Ali, who is such a massive, massive grifter, and has recently
just converted to Christianity.
Exactly, recently left her new atheism behind and converted to Christianity, because it was never about the atheism for her, obviously. But she wrote an article talking about how BLM was similar to Islamic extremism because they both had chants and just really stupid shit like that.
Yeah. It's like,
and it just reminds me of that, that ongoing effort to tie the left. Even now, you see, a lot of people, in terms of the Israel-Hamas situation, they keep trying to tie the left in as these Hamas lovers, right?
Yeah.
Columbia professors and Columbia students are losing their minds, and anti-Semitism is out of control on every single campus.
And it really seems odd that that's the conversation that's being had right now, when, what was it, last week or a week before that, there were 3 Palestinian students who were shot in Vermont,
right,
on a campus. It's like, yeah, I think that anti-Semitism is a big issue, and I think Islamophobia is a big issue.
Yeah.
These things are tied together,
right?
And so much of the discussion that seems to be happening right now is pretending that these two issues are not tied together, and that the well-being of both groups affected by it are not linked, but they are. And
Sam Harris, he's been really, really losing his mind these days.
Yeah, I haven't been keeping up with him for a while, but I read what was that book of his from long ago? One of his earliest things. I don't know.
Letter to a Christian Nation?
Yeah, I think that was it.
Yeah. Well, he's been podcasting more recently, and his takes are just out of this world. He frustrates me in particular because he's better at masking his bigotry. For people who are unfamiliar with this sort of tactic. And so he slips under the radar for a lot of people. And even Juliana Margulies, she said that she has been educating herself on Hamas by listening to Sam Harris's podcast, which is literally the worst way, because the guy just cannot contextualize anything. He's decided on like one narrative, which is very similar to like Netanyahu's children of darkness versus children of light, and he is just insisting on going with that. So his most recent, and I think he's pumped out like 5 in a matter of like 3-4 weeks, hysterically anti-Muslim, anti-Islam episodes. And his most recent one is like about how Islamophobia is not a thing. And like this is the time that he's choosing to really stress that message. And, he talks about how it's just like been weaponized so people can't criticize Islam. And, of course, doesn't mention that anti-Semitism is also being weaponized like pretty intensely these days and conflated with anti-Zionism.
Yeah, you had the U.S. House of Representatives just voted to say as much.
Yeah, it's so ridiculous to do that, and so dangerous.
It is, because it's, for a lot of people, this is just a game. This is just, it's scoring points, and it's that, and no one actually, like there are a lot of people who don't actually care about the well-being of Jews or Muslims.
Yeah.
They just want to be, oh, look, my side is the right one and yours is wrong. And then they try to paint everyone on the left as being, anti-Semitic, and they're pro-Hamas.
Yes. It's such a dishonest conversation from the start.
And I've seen people say, like, I'm not going to vote for Democrats because they support Hamas. And it's like, that's not even a little true.
Not even, yeah.
Elected Democrats, ones who are actually in office are basically have the same position on what's happening in the Middle East as Republicans. Like, this is one of those situations where it really is the uniparty believes, where it's just one party, that believes one thing, different degrees of it. But yeah, when they're pointing to like random people at protests and then being like, that's what the Democrats are, it's ridiculous. And it's the same exact thing happened during the Black Lives Matter protests, where activists would say, defund the police, and literally every Democrat, minus maybe 1 or 2, would say, no, we need to give the police more money.
Yeah.
And still Democrats will get labeled as anti-police, and they want to defund the police, even though it's like Joe Biden, he put out a statement it was like May 30th, 2020, saying, I oppose the idea of defunding the police. We should fund the police. And it was still, Biden loves riots, and Biden wants to defund the police. And it's just, we're not even talking in realities anymore. We're just
Biden
sort of
the communist.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about political messaging and campaigning than it is about actually dealing with what people believe, and if you disagree with them, trying to change their minds or trying to convince other people that other people have it wrong or something like that. But instead, we go, oh, Joe Biden wants to, kill your puppy, and and then you have to like backtrack to try to like address that claim. Otherwise, then it's just out there. And it doesn't help that there are so many different sources of information now that, every website, podcast, newsletter will give you can find your own curated source of information that affirms every belief you have.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, it makes it a lot easier to just kind of wall yourself off and do that.
Yeah. And, you find that a lot of people accuse the left of doing that, but actually a lot of people on the right do that endlessly. I mean, I like to listen to content that I disagree with, to the point where people that listen to my show are like, "Are you okay? Like, why are you doing this to yourself?" And yeah. So the hypocrisy is endless with right wingers. But that Bin Laden TikTok trend was just very, very convenient, I thought. And yeah, as you said, you can find any narrative. And I mean, didn't they say that Yashar cherry picked these examples and put together a reel and then boosted its popularity?
Yeah, that was another thing about it, where it was, if you create a compilation of something, and then you frame it as a giant trend that's happening, and then you post it online, and then people see that and then start talking about it to where you've made it much more popular than if you had not talked about it at all. It's like, are you helping, or are you just adding fuel to the fire? And I think that there are a lot of people who, especially, now in this sort of age of, needing to get people's attention and needing to get views and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, a better framing would be that you could, debunk those claims. If you find problematic TikTok videos, you could be like, "Oh, look at this sucks for this reason." But like, to compile it and be like, "Oh, young leftists are becoming Bin Laden lovers," that was just ridiculous, I thought.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah. So what is your view generally about covering? Because I think I saw you have some exchanges with, is it Mike Rothschild?
Yes.
On that topic. And I find it interesting, and I'm not obviously 100% decided myself. I cover a lot of extremism on my show, and through trial and error, I've come to the decision that absolutely do not try to discuss and debate with people who are awful. In my earlier online days, I used to think, well, maybe I can try and explain to them why they're wrong. Mm-hmm. No, that's not a good idea.
Yeah, a lot of people will pretend to, be like, "Oh, I have just a general question." It's like, do you?
Yeah, exactly.
Are you just genuinely asking a question, or are you just trying to get me to waste my time and energy?
Yes. So that's why I think you can have that content and you can talk about it, but you don't need to feature the people that are making that content necessarily. That's where I've ended up right now. What are your thoughts on talking about and discussing extremism? Because I think you and Mike were discussing this.
Yeah, we had different positions on this, and he argued that that the Bin Laden thing, for instance, it was important to talk about that, to bring that into the mainstream to talk about. And my argument was that this was a small handful of people on TikTok,
right,
who were not actually trending and who would probably fade out by the end of the day, or end of the week, and we would never hear about it. Not some QAnon style movement that was bubbling under the surface. And I think that it's important to not lift the voices of people who are saying extreme things if they are just kind of a flash in the pan kind of situation, because a lot of times it backfires. I mean, for instance, Lauren Boebert, who's a member of Congress, the reason that she's in Congress right now is likely because she showed up at a rally for Beto O'Rourke when he was running for president, and he said something about, damn right, I'm going to take your AR-15s, and she yelled at him or something publicly,
Oh.
and everyone talked about it. Oh, here's the lady that yelled at him, and then she got attention. Then conservatives started giving her money, and then she ran for office, and now she's in Congress.
Right.
In Congress, and posting pictures with Dave Chappelle as, haha,
right.
just some people who know that there are only two genders.
Yeah.
Obviously you don't know how these things are going to work out, but the most difficult part of succeeding in not necessarily politics, but I think business in the sort of attention economy is getting into the mainstream in the first place. That's a challenge to overcome. And if you're just helping them, if you're just helping someone get into a position where they can reach a larger audience, because if you put someone in front of, in front of 100 million people, and 99% of them disagree because their views are horrific, but 1% agree, you've just given them a million, a million believers, a million supporters. Like, they did not lose this exchange. You could crush them and destroy their arguments, but if 1% agree with them, then and it's easy to get 1% of people to agree with anything. The most horrible positions on the planet, but that's kind of my point of view, where it's like you really have to be careful.
So in terms of QAnon, though, like, you would be okay with highlighting that and discussing it, because it's large enough a movement already that it's you can't ignore it. Yeah,
I think that it's important to talk about these movements. One thing about QAnon is that the discussions of it in the press tended to deal with the movement itself and the beliefs of that movement, rather than the individual conspiracy theorists who were propping it up. You'd see stories about these the various QAnon influencers on places like Media Matters, but you wouldn't see them pop up in like NBC News reporting.
Right. Yeah. Thank you so much, Parker, for joining me today. And is there anything you want to plug?
No, I mean, if people want to go to my newsletter, which is at Read TPA, as in Read the Present Age .com. That's my newsletter. I write there. You can sign up for free and keep up with all of my random thoughts.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Parker.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
All right. Take care. Have a nice day.
You too.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to support it, there are several ways you can do that. You can share it online, talk about what you just heard. You can leave a 5-star review to help others find it too. And you can also subscribe via patreon.com/nice mangoes. No E in mangoes. If you'd like to follow me on Twitter before it's completely wrecked, you'll find me at Nice Mangoes. Again, no E in mangoes.